This season of the Good Up podcast is sponsored by Empath Psychological Services. Good Up is our space to talk about those experiences in life we didn't know we all had in common. We're the after work happy hour conversation with your best friend.
You good up vibe, like, hello.
The place where you bring up the hard parts of life, the ones that made you laugh, and the things that made you who you are. Because who said becoming good up wasn't a little bit uncomfortable? Stay tuned for more information about this week's episode.
Here at the Good Up Pod, we're all about shedding light on life experiences that have contributed to who we are and learning to navigate them to find a feeling that's, well, good up.
For some of us, that journey includes therapy. Empath Psychological Services operates with the belief that life's challenges are not all of who we are.
They aim to create a non-judgmental environment to help their clients harness their own power and to find their path to mental well-being. Good Up and Empath Psychological Services share a passion for helping others navigate their own healing their way.
If you're interested in teletherapy services in the U.S. Virgin Islands or the state of Texas, check out the link in the description box for more information on how you can book a session with Empath Psychological Services. Hey, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the Good Up motherfucking podcast. I am your host, one of the twins that dances next to Beyonce, particularly the one who she sits on during the concert. That's what
I am one of the bodycon dresses that En Vogue wore in the 90s.
Oh,
period.
Sickening.
Yeah,
Were you
because them
Diamond?
bitches was bad. Them ladies was bad as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you, Diamond?
Love that. I'm Sir Carter because he's too busy for y'all. He be home chilling. Eating his snack.
Sir
That is
Carter
me.
said, "Are you in getting pictures? You in getting
Sir Carter
videos?"
said, "Baby, you could get a picture once every 5 years."
Mhm.
Period. Because Rumi be outside with her daddy.
Yeah, y'all, we talking about the babies this week though. We are.
Yeah.
It's funny because this episode came because Diamond has been experiencing full-blown motherhood this summer and had some thoughts on it and all the things, and then we end up having a conversation about kids and my nieces and nephews and mental health and all of that stuff. So here's where we are. We're here. We are going to be talking about specifically children and teenagers and their mental health and the things that we learn from just observing kids and how they navigate the world. Because if it's one thing kids gonna do is teach you about fucking life, okay? Everybody
Oh,
thinks
for
that
sure.
they're these little humans who don't know anything, but they honestly know more about life and doing this life shit correctly than the rest of us.
Than we do. Yeah, these kids got the keys.
They're
to the
really
I
kingdom.
feel like
for the kingdom.
definitely smarter than us a little bit.
They are.
Oh, for sure.
They are
for
because
sure.
they can see a lot. They can see a lot more objectively than we can.
Yes.
And their views
Yeah.
on life aren't like skewed by all the bullshit yet, and they haven't paid
Mhm.
rent. I think once you pay rent at party, it'll be like fuck everything. So
Facts.
I feel like once your credit score humble you,
everything will change. Everything will
everything
change.
Everything
once that
changes.
credit score drop 40 points, okay.
Mhm. Once you
That'll ever
once
be
you
a fun
realize you have a
notification
car
again.
note, once you realize you have a cell phone bill, like the cell phone don't just stay on because of your mother. Anyway, so
Yeah.
Oh, one
Baby
more, because
girl.
once you realize that the same qualifications you need to buy a house is pretty much the qualifications you need to rent an apartment,
Mhm.
It's crazy and it's
Mhm.
really wild out
it's
here.
such a
It's truly ghetto, but prior to the ghetto-ness, you have a lot of wisdom to impart on life as a child
Yeah,
and
for
as a
sure.
teenager. So
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I'm going to start with this question because I think obviously I love bringing in our personal experiences before we like dive into the rest of the episode. So when it comes to mental health, how did your parents or the adults in your life approach your mental health as a child or as a teenager? Like, what types of things were you experiencing, whether it was like actual mental health issues or not? And like, how did the adults in your life respond to those issues?
I can go first.
Yeah, please do, because I don't know what to say.
So the mother that raised us, mental health was not a thing in our house. But I do remember the earliest memory I have of, like, I guess my health being prioritized because my my overall health was being affected by my mental health. At the time, I didn't have the language for it. I'm sure my mom had the language for it, but she didn't want to say anything because I guess, island people, they don't want to like taint you or have you using things as a crutch. But now that I'm looking back, very obviously going through a depressive episode. What happens with me when I'm depressed is my appetite is like gone. That's why I've been snatched on my 20s. So I was maybe like 17, 18, and this one must have been really bad because when I said to you, I must have lose about 10,000 pounds. When I said Katria were buying Ensure, the fridge was full of groceries constantly. And when I say, I just remember like every time I think back on those times, I just remember her constantly being like, "Damn, you need to eat." It was to the point where she was making my lunch like for me to eat, making breakfast, shoving her Ensure in my face. And all I wanted to do was play The Sims and be left alone. Now, I know what caused that depressive episode, because the thing with me and my mental health is it's not like, yeah, that chemical imbalance shit. We all know that. However, for me, what it is I get triggered. So something will happen that will make me spiral, and then, bitch, I'm on the couch for 6 years. And that was going on. Nobody knew what was the cause of it. She just knew Diamond's not eating. Diamond's not doing anything. All she's doing is playing The Sims, and she's literally withering away. And so now that I look back, that's really the only time I've ever seen my mom prioritize my mental health. And technically, I was still a child. I was still in her care. But prior to that, there wasn't even conversations about mental health. There was nothing about that. It was just very much like, you either crazy if you have mental issues, or like that's not a thing.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask that, like, was there ever a time where you guys expressed that you were going through something, right? Maybe you didn't say, "Oh, I'm depressed," but you said like, "I stressed," right? Or you get heartbroken from something, and the adults in your life are like, you're a child, you can't be stressed. Like,
you know what's funny? Yeah, we weren't allowed to be stressed. We were children. That's a joke in their eyes. But I do remember my mom being very supportive with me through a breakup. She was always very supportive whenever there was some sort of sadness surrounding, like, so I remember a few things. I remember in junior high, I had a really big crush on this boy. I had a serious crush on this boy. And I think my mom, I don't know if she knew about the crush, but she found out about the crush when I came home devastated, in tears, upset because one of my friends kind of spilled the beans to him, but not in a way to be like helpful. She just was kind of being a bitch. And it really hurt my feelings. And I came home devastated, crying. And that's one of the only memories I have of my mom really hugging me tight and not letting go until I was ready to let go. She hugged me so tight. She coddled me. She made me, she was like, "I'm so sorry that happened." She was so supportive through that. That was that. And then in high school, my first love, my little high school sweetheart, I moved to New York. So him and I broke up. I was sad for that, but I came back from New York, and mind you, this is like years. This is everything I was talking about is spread out over years, but we were broken up for a while. And then one day I just decided I wanted my man back. We got back together. But then the girlfriend he was with when I had decided I wanted to be back with him, he took a break from her. He had me thinking they were fully
tell a
broken
story
up.
on a podcast before.
I told it before, right?
Yeah.
So he took a break with her, came back to me, and then took a break with me and went back to her. And when I caught on to that, I was so upset. So for me, I'm like, it's a child. We're done. Like, fuck you. But I was devastated. I remember my mom being very supportive through that. Like, she was like, don't, like, I know why you're upset. Like, I get it. She was very supportive to that. And I remember I didn't have an appetite during that time either. And I remember her being like, you gotta make sure you eat. Like, but other than that,
I remember talking to either both of you about your mom's view on like having a partner, right? Like being in a relationship and how she valued that, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that a reason she was willing to like show you empathy in those situations is because she saw the value in like partnership and she understood,
absolutely.
she could empathize with like the
why.
breakup part of it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know for a fact that that's why. Like, I've never doubted that. Like, it's like she values things like that. Like, she values romance. She listen, my mom, my entire life, what was in her hand was a romance novel. She's one of those, she's a girl's girl. She loves having a man.
She loves love.
She loves love. Yeah, she does love love. And so I think that's why she was able to hold space for us when we had struggles when it came to like romantic relationships, because she's a romantic girlie.
Because I will say, in the moments where I remember my mother holding space for me, especially where like I was going through something emotional or like a mental health struggle, was when, and it goes so terrible. Whenever I was beefing with one of my female friends, my mother had the smoke for everybody. She was there. She was ready, right?
Period.
But thinking about it and thinking about, because Deidre, we've been talking about like female friendships in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
My mother typically went through like beef with her female. Like she didn't have a
so
lot
she could
of like,
it resonated
so
with
she
her.
could, the things she could resonate with, she was able to give me empathy for. But like I remember going through like high school breakups and like crying and being like devastated, but I don't remember whether or not my mom even picked up on me going through those type of like emotional things. And I also remember being in junior high, and I've told a story on the podcast before. I told a story on the first episode of the podcast where I got in trouble for dating somebody who was too old for me, right? He wasn't like an adult, but he was way too old of a teenager for somebody in middle school. Mm-hmm. And my mom's reaction to it was like extremely negative, extremely like, I don't know what the fuck you doing with your life. I was making all of these like bad decisions, but there was never a point where I think it occurred to her, like, your daughter is going through like a transition. She's going through mental health struggles. Her grades are going down when she's been a straight A student her whole life. Like, this is obviously mental health related. And to her, the reaction was like, well, like, you can't be stressed about nothing right now. So you just fucking up on purpose.
That's crazy.
Like, girl, school is stressful. Like,
that's what's that. School is so stressful.
And then I was in middle school. I'm going through middle school as a fat girl, which is like, for fat girls, worst time of your life. Because everybody in middle school is an asshole, especially boys.
Most kids in middle school either MAGA or fat. There's no shade. So the MAGA bitches teasing the fat bitches. The fat bitches is like, girl, fuck you. I can't help that I'm fat. Like, it's just a whole stressful thing. And mind you, the MAGA bitches teasing everybody around them that's more marginalized because they pissed because they ain't got no tits yet. Mm-hmm. The boys ain't looking at them.
And then if you do have boobs, you're being ostracized.
And over-sexualized. Criticized.
Yeah. Middle school is a nightmare. Yeah. But I say a lot to say, I was clearly struggling with that transition in my life. And the response to it from both my parents was to witness me make a mistake and like fuck up. And it never clicked to them like, she going through something, like something's happening emotionally to cause her to act like this, because she's never acted like this before. So it's just interesting how parents' response is either dismissive, like it doesn't exist, or they don't have enough information to even like recognize when it is happening. Or I've heard that same time, you too young to be stressed, you too young to go through heartbreak. And like, can we talk about that for a second? Because like, where does that mentality come from? That just because I'm not an adult, I can't experience the emotional range of a normal human being. Like,
I always find myself wondering why so many adults forget what childhood is like. Like I realized, because I felt like when we were growing up, the adults were so far removed from us. But even now as an adult, I think about what some of our peers say about parenting and about children. And I'm like, you don't remember being a child? Like, even like the fact that there are people our age who still believe in hitting kids is wild to me, right? The fact that that's still a debate is so insane. And I'm just like, y'all don't remember that you didn't like getting beat? Like, you don't remember that? Like,
you don't remember being afraid of your parents?
Yeah. Like, I don't want Dylan to fear me. Like, you want your child to be afraid of you? Like, you're okay with this? Like, it's interesting. A lot of adults just kind of, as they grow up, they forget what childhood felt like. And I, for one, cannot forget that shit. I remember vividly.
I think they just don't respect kids enough to see them as full humans. That's the way I see it. I think they just, in their mind, like, obviously you're not a fully developed human, but they don't see children as full humans that have a full range of motion or a full range of emotions or anything like that. So like, they just decide like, okay, you are mine. Everything that happens in your little brain is me and a reflection of me, and there's nothing that should be wrong because I provide everything, I take care of everything, and that's it. And I don't think they pay attention to the fact that outside of what's in the walls of your home or in the doors of your car, like, your kids still have an entire life and world outside of you. And people don't seem to really put that in the forefront of their mind when it comes to children. That's my
That's such
opinion.
an interesting point.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
do you think that there's some shame attached to that? Like the thought of their child going through something makes them feel ashamed because they think they're doing something wrong as a parent? Because I always just saw it as them forgetting that what it's like to be a child and not thinking about the things children are going through because they're so far removed from it. But what if shame is attached to it?
That could be it. For me
think-
personally,
yeah.
I personally don't think it's that. And the reason why is because, see, I only think so much of children because of those classes I took in UVI. Like the majority of my undergrad was early childhood development or environmental courses because I thought I wanted to be an educator. Notice how I said that.
Mm-hmm.
And in those early childhood development classes specifically, that's when it really that was when I really started to take the mind of children very seriously. Like, holy shit, they have completely different minds. Their underdeveloped mind forces them to perceive things in this way, and their imaginations do this to them. And so because of that, that's why I think so much about children. But most of the people that I know or that I interact with who really view children in that way is because they're either extremely empathetic or they have a lot of knowledge on the brains of children. So I don't think it's I mean, it could be a shame thing, but I really think it's just like an ignorance thing. Like people just don't know any better.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it.
I think it
Like-
could be both to an extent. Like, I think in large, it is an ignorance thing. I assume that because you are a child, this is the limit of your knowledge and your emotional range, and
Right.
like you can't have these experiences. I think it's that forgetting that you were once a child, and that even though to an adult, this painful thing I'm experiencing might seem like child's play and a child's like level of heartbreak, but to that child, it's a mountain, is the
everything,
fucking
yeah.
wall, right? And then I think shame could come in because I remember how my mother responded to the first episode where she said, like, I did my best with you. Like I tried to provide you a good life and tried to do this and tried to do that. And like, you could tell there was shame behind, like, you're telling me that I didn't do enough. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm telling you. I'm telling you that you did everything you possibly could. And even with that, there were some gaps here that I still need to talk about because that was my life experience, right? Like for her, it was like, you telling me that I didn't do enough, right? As a parent. So I think it's possible that when a child is saying, I'm depressed, I'm having a hard time, life is hard, the parent is seeing themselves as, well, if my job is your caretaker and you're depressed, then I've somehow failed in my role as your caretaker.
yeah.
But what they're not considering, which is, I think Diamond said earlier, I don't spend all day with you. I'm at school. I have these
Exactly.
friendships that I'm developing. I have these relationships that you know nothing about, because for me personally, my mother knew nothing about every single relationship I was in from throughout high school. The first real boyfriend my mother meet, I was well into college. Like, I never introduced any of those relationships to her. So you're seeing me come home, you see me cry, you see me depressed, and in your head is like, what could you possibly be going through? But I'm not telling you.
That's
half of
so
that shit.
dumb to me. That's so wild. Listen, them children to show up to school and they'll be a whole different person. You really forget that you were living a life too. Like I remember what I was up to in junior high and high school. Okay.
Yeah, imagine
I
going to
have
math class, the one class you hate, and you getting a text message and a boy bust your chest while you there in math.
Listen,
In math.
imagine you getting the news that your man kissing somebody else under the bleachers, and listen, this is the kind of fuck that'll be going on in school. And these adults really can't remember that they had them same scandals. Like, and then we're in the age of like we're in like the digital age. So now these kids got Instagram and shit. So they're finding out the tea via DM, via text message. They dealing with cyberbullying. They dealing with a whole other level of like this world outside of the world that their parents have created in the home. Like, are y'all really that oblivious?
Yeah,
Like,
I
come
honestly,
on.
I'll give patience to adults who had the delusion that like the millennial kids had nothing to worry about, right? I'll give a little patience there. But if you are a parent of a Gen Z or Gen Alpha child growing up in the world that they're growing up in, and you think they can't possibly be going through shit when all they have to do is open Instagram and somebody could tell them to kill themselves, like, be fucking for real.
Be fucking for
Be so fucking
real.
serious. So speaking of Gen Z and Gen Alpha, I want to transition the conversation. So all of us, Deidre is a mom, Diamond is also a mom to the same child.
I'm a half mom. Okay.
She's a half mom. And then
And that half is
y'all
a
have
half.
had nieces and nephews. Y'all have been aunts for a very long time, right?
Yeah, our whole
Since-
lives. We don't know a life not being an aunt.
Exactly.
We've been like aunts our whole lives.
I became an aunt at 14, and I had that experience of growing up. Like the rest of my teenage years were with this child in my life, right? So I've been an aunt to an extent though, because I've been away from them for a really long time. Like I haven't been in their day-to-day life for a while. But I've still learned things from being an aunt, from seeing those kids and from seeing them grow up. So
Good.
if I could ask you like one thing that the children or teenagers in your life have taught you about like mental and emotional health, what do you think that, like, what would that lesson be that you've learned from them and not necessarily from life?
This is something I learned in therapy, but I feel like I have to, like, my nieces and nephews remind me to apply it to life. And it's that your mental health is your business. Like my mental health is my business, right? And I'm saying that because like just today, my oldest niece crossed my mind, and she, from my perception, has been isolating herself. Last time I experienced her isolating herself was when she was in her last relationship. After the relationship ended, come to find out she wasn't that happy. And so lately I've been feeling like, okay, she isolated herself. I know there's nothing that nobody else in the family really did to her, but everybody that I've been in touch with, I'm like, when last have you heard from such and such? And they're like, oh, it's been a minute, but you know, I check up on her every once in a while. And so like one of the things I learned from her is just like, you have to let people go through their stuff by themselves. Like people are going to come out of their mental crises when they are good and ready, or when they're not in a position to do it themselves cognitively, and the other people around them have to get involved. But as long as like somebody's balanced enough to know when it's time to like snap out of it, you kind of gotta just let them ride that wave. And that's one of the things I feel like I've learned from my niece and nephews. And I have to use her as an example because she's of the older batch of the children.
Not the
so
older
the
batch.
other ones don't really have much to teach me about mental health per se, but I know with her being a young lady and going through woman things, it's likely, not saying that currently she's depressed or anything, but she has a higher chance of actually experiencing a manageable mental health crisis than some of my other nieces and nephews. So that's one of the things I learned is like, let people go through their stuff. People's mental health is their business, and just be there for them if you care about them when they're ready for you to be there for them.
I like that. That's a good lesson. I'm gonna say the most cliche thing ever. We've been hearing it all over the internet, but it's what I learned from my baby. It's that you can't pour from an empty cup. And he didn't say those words to me, but one thing I've always been good at, right? No matter what I'm going through, is showing up for Dylan. There have been times where I was severely depressed, and I was able to, at the very least, muster up the energy to make sure Dylan had his needs met. Make sure he's fed, make sure he goes to school, make sure. I have gotten so good at like putting on a mask and making myself seem okay just so that Dylan can have the day that he deserves. And then like, I can remember there have been times where I'm like, Deidre, just one foot in front of the other, just make him his breakfast, just give him a hug, just chat with him a little. You'll be fine. Just walk him to school. Once he gets to school, you could come back to bed. Like it's been like that. But I had to recognize, like, if you're able to muster up that kind of energy for a whole other person, granted, I made him, right? Like my body literally turned him into a human. If you can muster up that kind of energy for him, you should be able to muster up that energy for you. So make it, so do that. So I've been doing that. And then one of the best lessons he taught me in the same vein was, this was when he was e-learning during the pandemic. He was 6. And I had a habit, because again, my nature, because for me, I know I have like, he can't take care of himself. Like I have to take care of him. I'm responsible for him. So I would get up in the morning, I would get him ready for school because he was learning here at the house. So I would get him ready for school, give him his breakfast and everything. And then he would go in his room and, log on to class, and I would do some chores around the house and stuff. And then I haven't eaten yet. I might have had a cup of coffee, maybe, right? But I'm doing so many things. I've walked the dogs. I've done everything for everybody. By lunchtime, I'm hungry. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so hungry. And I remember one time I'm making Dylan his lunch, and he's sitting there waiting, and he goes, and I'm like venting because I'm so hungry. He said, Mommy. I said, what? He said, why don't you just make your breakfast when you make mine? And I was like, I was so shook because it never occurred to me to make myself breakfast.
Because
I've
for
never
you,
been-
it's Dylan is the focus, right? And it's not like for you is like I can't do these things at the same time because number one priority is Dylan.
And then he gets into this monologue, right? Because I'm convinced Dylan is an old soul. He said, "Mommy, you get up every morning, you make me breakfast, you get me ready for school, you walk the girls, and you don't eat. And you're already making breakfast, so you should just make some for you too." But I was like, honestly, Bubby, you're right. That makes a lot of sense. Like, thank you. And so even aside from like the breakfast thing, I just kind of had to really let his words sink in and be like, Deidre, the same way you can make energy for other people, you need to be making that energy for yourself, because you're gonna, the quality of what you're sharing with others is gonna improve when you're taking better care of yourself. Like, so yeah, that's what I learned from him, was to really just kind of put myself first. Like,
and that is facts coming from a child, because especially if it's your child, nobody has the first-hand experience of you as a person quite like your child does. Your child, and you could say your partner, sure, but your child is literally soaking in everything you do in order to develop themselves. So that person is literally looking at your behavior all day, every fucking day. So if a child tell you about yourself, ain't a lie.
They're literal
It's
sponges,
not a lie.
especially depending on where in their development they are. They are, their brains are sponges, literally. They're, like you said, they're absorbing everything, and they are processing that information and creating their psyche and their reality based on what you are exposing them to, what you're feeding them, verbally, or,
And they're also observing other people's behavior around you. When a child don't like your friends or your partner or whoever, it's because they could see something that you can't, because they're observing, like, you, when adults are talking, they're not talking directly to a child. So the child just sitting and taking bem, basically, listening to melee and observing everything. That was me. That was definitely me as a child.
I used to know everybody's business.
Listen, because they used to talk shit around me, and I never used to talk directly to me. So I used to be like, so Diamond came to this episode prepared. Diamond has 5 talking points.
This is really a spin on the things we learn from yada yada yada. You remember how we did the things we learned from our moms, our dads? What was the other one?
Our siblings.
Well, now I want us to do the things we learn from children.
Okay.
And the reason why is because y'all know I'm obsessed with children in a healthy way. I love watching children exist.
She said,
I love
a healthy way.
In a healthy way, bitch.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Don't put me with the creepers, okay? And understand, I'm only obsessed with the children that I care about. Now, I care about the welfare of all children, but I don't emotionally care about all the children in the world. Like, let's be clear. Your kids are your business. You care about them little suckers, okay?
No, facts.
But the children that I'm close to, the children that I take a liking to, or that I just randomly emotionally connect with, they're my babies. And I observe every little thing about them. I really believe in coming down to their level, but still like maintaining my level of understanding so that we could kind of meet in the middle, like compromise, if you will. And so, the girls know I'm a mother, period. I've been having Dylan for the summer. It's been lit. And my first weekend with him, I decided to do like a little transition for him because I knew this would be a different environment. And my way of doing that was to, his first weekend here, like Deidre left on a plane, baby, he had company. Okay. His little friend Amari was over, my dear friend Brandon. I was like, listen, bring your child. Okay. Him and Dylan are about the same age. They're friends now. Those boys think they're cousins because, we had to scam them a little bit. The shy children, they don't want to socialize with people. I was like, that's your cousin. So my way of easing Dylan into this new routine of like being in Nana's friggin' 1-bedroom apartment with all these random polka dots on the wall and shit was to kind of just, it wasn't like a cold turkey thing. It was like, okay, mommy's gone, but like, here's Amari, y'all play, let's be fun and friends or whatever. And I won't say I have regrets, but what it did is it kind of sparked this thing in me to just observe the way children are when they're by themselves as well as with other children. And child, in doing that, I came to these 5 things that I learned from these children and that I think most people would say that they also learn from children. But first things first, I want to go into my little tangent about mom brain, because the girls be talking about this mom brain, and it's not just about like being forgetful. I became like an insomniac that was just obsessing over doing everything perfectly. Like, nothing in this world has fucked with my self-esteem more than being responsible for that human. And I don't think enough people talk about that.
Yeah,
so
it's
that's
a
like
fact.
Yeah,
can we
that's
talk
a
about
mention.
the level of anxiety I had the entire time I was with my sister and our baby, because I was like, okay, don't kiss him. Wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Don't get COVID on this plane. What if I sneeze and he ain't in the same room? Oh my God.
What if there's a
what if
random
I
germ
right
right here that he picks up on his cheek because I forgot to put the blanket thing over my shoulder? I
remember laying in bed one night and I was like, okay, Z tired, James tired. What if the baby wake up and I don't hear you? I have to be able to hear the baby. So I cracked my door to hear. This child have two parents, two that have been taking care of him just fine without me. And all of a sudden I was like, what if he wake up?
You feel like
yes. And the thing is, it's like, I think there needs to be a new name for mom brain. Maybe we could come up with it by the end of the episode. But let me tell y'all something. The first week of me having Dylan was, for me, up here in my cabeza, it was a nightmare. Not because of him, but because of me. Because I was putting all this pressure on myself to be perfect. I've never been one to believe in perfectionism until it was like, this child is depending on me. Yeah. Where's the food? Where's the water? Is the water hot enough? Is the AC cold enough? Is the Wi-Fi fast enough? Oh my God. The waffles in the air fryer are too crispy. Like, it's too much. So that was very stressful. Okay. It was very stressful. And like I said, it was the first time something had really messed with my self-esteem. Like for real. Like, I've experienced some stuff, like fucking with my confidence in certain things, but like, I really was like, oh my God, are you even good enough to do this? Girl.
And it makes you think about, like, for example, Deidre, right? Where like, that's 24/7. And I'm like,
it's my literal life.
When I say I have a new respect for mothers or just parents in general, anybody who's responsible for the life of another human, I have the utmost respect for you, because I've never experienced this much anxiety. The first time this is my first time really experiencing like anxiety for real. Going into the mom brain experience that I had, and my self-esteem being a little like wobbly, having, sea legs. First thing I want to lead with, one of the 5 things that I learned from children, is really knowing and applying the difference between self-esteem and confidence. And I think people kind of just go through the world thinking that they're one and the same, and they're not. They're definitely like parallel. They feed into each other, but self-esteem, do we need to define self-esteem? Because I got the definition.
Go ahead. You know.
Hey, I'm gonna require the definition.
I love.
She's gonna require the code. We cite our sources here on the Good Podcast.
Good notes. We just cite our fucking sources. Okay.
Okay. Period. And so. Right. So self-esteem is the confidence in one's own worth or abilities, i.e. self-respect, right? So of course, we know having a high self-esteem plays into that. And then of course, when it comes to confidence, there are multiple meanings, but with regard to this topic, confidence is a feeling of self-assurance arising from one's appreciation of one's own abilities or qualities. Now, here's what made me go into this deep dive into it, because watching Dylan and Amari exist, both children are very confident. Both children, I would say, have very high self-esteem. However, I saw how their confidence shifted when it came to certain things, right? And it kind of played into how they interacted with one another and how they interacted with me as the adult that was supervising them, right? So like Dylan, for example, Dylan is confident in a lot of things. He's mostly confident in his aptitude for learning, Dylan knows he's smart.
He's a genius.
He knows he's smart. He knows he's handsome. Yeah, he knows he's smart. He knows he's handsome. He knows a lot of things about himself. So he has a high self-esteem. He's confident in those things. Dylan is a very shy child. He's not outgoing. He's an introvert. He's an actual introvert. He's an actual introvert. So when he's in his little nest in his own dwelling,
confident
he runs
here.
His place.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He don't be turning up.
All the way up there. Okay, I have 9-foot ceilings. It's 10 feet. Okay. But when Dylan is out in the streets, he literally just don't look at me, don't talk to me, and that don't mean he don't have high self-esteem. It just means his confidence outside of his comfort zone is not. Don't play on me. I need to process this.
Yeah.
And Amari is different, right? Because Amari high self-esteem, not very confident in certain things. Like when it comes to the academics and stuff, he's like, ooh, relax. Baby, if you put a football in that boy's hand, he probably throws better than Colin Kaepernick and all them suckers put together. Okay? When it comes to video games, which, you know, Dylan is a gamer nerd. So but watching these kids, right, but watching these kids, it was so like interesting. I was just like I had to figure out the language for it, because I'm just like, these children are completely different when they're together versus when they're apart versus when they're together in public with other people or in public individually. Like, I never knew Amari was shy until he met Dylan. Like him and Dylan's first interaction, Dylan is like, where's Amari? Like, ready to meet him because I'd spoken so highly of Amari. I'm like, that's your cousin. Y'all know I scammed him. And Amari, for the first time, I've been around Amari for months now, was shy as can be. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, it threw me for a loop. And I had to kind of reel it in, because I was just like, Diamond, his tiny little human brain. Like, you have to come to his level. You're seeing a new side of him. But I said all that to say, like, paying attention to these kids made me really realize, like, when it comes to the humans we deal with on a day-to-day basis, we have to really know when to be mindful of somebody's self-esteem and when their confidence is coming into play. Like, even in the workplace, for example, you might be working with somebody that has the highest self-esteem, but they might not be confident in their ability to like run this report or communicate this issue to leadership and all of that. And I was just like, shout out to these fucking weird ass kids for teaching me things. You know what I mean? Because I had never really applied it until watching them like interact at the pool. Like, Amari just randomly walking up to grown ass women to like make them laugh because he wanted their floaty. Like, I kid you not, this is a literal experience. I'm like hearing these random women at the end of the pool laughing their ass off. I'm like, why is this bitch so loud? I look around, this little boy is over here saucing up these women because he want to ask them for their floaty.
That's so cute.
You know what I mean? That was the first thing. I was like, that's actually really dope. And I feel like the girlies need to know. And if you pay attention to children, you would learn things like how I learned that, you know, self-esteem
and also, like, there's a level of patience that you're talking about here that you gave to them to allow them to adjust to each other that I don't think we as adults give to each other and to other people, because there have been so many situations that I've heard of, like, you observe that a person is introverted and your immediate action is to try to make that person extroverted instead of trying to adjust to their introversion. People do that fuck to me a lot. Like, it's the minute they find out I'm not like a lovey-dovey, like hugger type person right from the get-go, it's, oh, I can bring you out to your shell. And I'm like,
that's so weird.
Or you could just wait. Like, you could just wait and eventually I would get
back
there.
up.
You could earn access to me. Yeah, you could actually earn access to me in that way instead of trying to bring me out of my shell. What?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, it's fun, and it's funny too, because like you'll notice that the people who do that to children are probably the people doing that same thing to other adults, because there were adults in my life who, like, when I reached a party, I'm like, no, I don't want to hug everybody. I don't want to social. I just want to come in here and go about my business. Like, just leave me alone. Don't make me the center of attention. And adults either come here and tell you and them hi. Come here. I used to be like, oh God. And they'll still do that fuck to me now. I'll be like, dude, I am 30. Stop forcing me to do this.
Like, relax, lady. Relax.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So that is a very interesting observation.
Yes, child. So y'all need to, like, you know, listeners, self-esteem and confidence, two different things. Know when to apply that. Okay? Period.
Yeah.
The other thing that I learned from the children, and if you're an OG listener of the read, y'all know Crystal West always talks about like the fact that like words mean things, right?
Yes.
So that's something that obviously I apply to life. But I kind of looked at it from a different perspective, right? Because I'm very mindful of the language that I use. I am the queen of loaded language. I love it over here, okay? So I know when to use loaded language, and I'm very intentional about the words I use, when I use them, how I use them. But in an interaction I had with Amari, I'm not going to say the details of it because, you know, I'm calling this boy's real name and like, I don't want to be talking people business. But I just remember I use you know how, you know, in English language, words are interchangeable. So when you hear the word beat, what do you think?
Like abuse, physical assault. Yeah, like beating.
Yeah, but like I kind of had this interaction with him where we're talking about something. I use the word beat. I don't beat children, okay? But his definition of beat it, like a beating versus a whooping, two different things.
Two different things.
Right? And so I had this moment, like this light bulb moment of like, bitch, words mean things. And to this boy, a beating and a whooping, two different things. And I remember because I ain't gonna lie, I like to sometimes scare the kids. Like, baby, if I know your parents to bust your ass, hey, mama, listen, papa, you act up, I'm gonna tell your father, he gonna beat you. Right? That was the thing I had said to him, right? And so I know that's not the most healthy thing, but I needed him to know, like, okay, because he was pushing some boundaries and I was running out of options, and I'm not gonna beat people kids, and people kids know I'm not beating you, but baby, if your mama beat you, I'm gonna tell her to beat your ass. Okay? But it was in a later conversation with him where we were talking about something else, and I paid attention to how and when he uses the word beat, and I instantly was like, holy shit, bitch, you need to stop
basically
using the
just
word.
tell you that he parents about to rag his ass up and down the street, and he's sitting there panicking like,
He's using the words differently.
Word beat is synonymous with just like straight up abuse, but to him a whooping is like a form of punishment that's reasonable. Like if I get a whooping, it's because I know I've been doing the most, and I think he's smart enough to talk about that. Like he'll talk about the difference between like he'll describe to you a beating and a whooping, right? And so in that moment I was like, bitch, words mean things. And you have to kind of really like know your audience, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I learned from kids, because I ain't gonna hold you, I love to use my vocabulary. I love to let the girls know I'm intelligent. Okay. But sometimes it kind of goes over people's head. And like one of the things I deal with at work, for example, me and one of my colleagues is like, some of the residents hate us. They legitimately hate us. And I realized
you're so annoying for that.
Like they hate her because they always like to refer to her as a smart ass. Lots of unpacking to do with that. But I recognize that it's because just the way we speak to them or with them, and not like knowing when certain words are not necessary, or certain ways that we speak, or certain, I don't know. I you know what I mean? I feel like y'all picking up or putting down?
No, it does make sense. And it's also like, you gotta think about it too when it comes to like apologizing to kids. At least that's what come into my mind, is that like words mean things, and just because you said something that you think wasn't impactful to a child or would hurt that child's feelings doesn't mean that you don't have to think about how you impacted that child's feelings. Like,
yeah. So the other thing that I was reminded of, because I do have to say these are things that I've already known, but like it kind of stuck from being in proximity to this child and these other children, right? So this touches on one of the things that we were talking about earlier about adults not taking into consideration that these little humans have lives outside of their time with us, right? And watching like how Amari and Dylan navigate when they think I'm not watching versus when they know I'm watching, so crazy. And I'm just like, child, it's the duality for me. These
children are fucking two-faced scammers.
They're very much so. They
are two-faced scammers.
And I live for it, because duality is very important in this society.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Duality is important, especially for Black people. Y'all had the episode about code switching, which I would love to see us live in a world where code switching is not a necessity. But for right now, it is for us. Maybe by the time they're adults, it won't be. But
I'm glad you mentioned that. And I'm so sorry to cut you off, but I have to say this on the show. I recognized at work a few weeks ago why I code switch, right? And it's back to what Heiza said. I find that if we speak to non-Black people, especially white people, in the way we speak to each other, they think that's an invitation to speak to us like that.
Absolutely.
And it's a fucking no. And then now that puts me in a position where I either have to tolerate it or put myself in the position to educate you on why it's not okay to do that. Right. And I'm like, I just find myself just being like, let me just get through this so you could leave, because I don't feel like educating you on this bullshit right now. I don't feel like this literally happened at work one time where I made a joke with one of the clients, and I said it in like an AAVE kind of way. Like I joked in the way I would with one of y'all.
Regurgitated.
And she suddenly started talking like that. And this is a white woman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a
Yeah.
middle-aged white woman. And I'm thinking, this is why I code switch. Because now this woman thinks that it's okay to speak to the one Black woman in the room like this. Me speaking the way I normally speak is not an invitation for you to change the way you speak. And you could continue speaking the way you speak, and I can speak the way I speak. It irritated me, and it made me think back to the episode. And we had already had the episode at that point. But carry on, Diamond. I'm sorry.
I'm glad I bring up code switching though, because something we didn't talk about in the code switching episode is that kids code switch with their parents, which is the point that I'm bringing up versus other people, right? Or like with their adult caretakers versus other people. And I talk about it a little bit earlier, where I was saying like I had this whole life going on that my mother didn't know about, right? I had this whole demeanor with my friends that my mother didn't know about, right? Like she knows my personality and she knows me very well, but me home versus me in school, I was a heathen.
Yeah.
And she didn't know.
So yeah, the importance of duality, and I what made me kind of think about it was the fact that like watching Amari, for example, he's growing up in like two wildly different environments. Like he has, two different households, his mom's household, his dad's household, and it's completely different. And so it's very easy for him to not code switch in his language, but code switch in his behavior, knowing what expectations to meet. He knows where he has freedoms, and he's very good at like testing the water. He will pay attention to like, okay, let me see what, like, I'm going to pay attention to what the limits are in this household with this adult, and I'm going to get to that limit, right? And so when I say the code switching, like he's a borderline scammer. I live for y'all know I love badass kids. He's not a bad kid, but watching him exist, like when he thinks I'm not looking, he really be trying to run amok, okay? But that's because he's been exposed to all these different environments, and he's gonna read how these adults react to things, and he's gonna know, okay, I'm gonna cut up and do what I could do, right? And Dylan, I realized that because Dylan's an introvert and he prefers to be home, he's, he goes to school in one setting, he's not in very many different environments in the sense of like, okay, he's exposed to the hood, he's exposed to the uppity people, he's exposed to this. Dylan is very like, he has a very linear kind of experience. And watching them to navigate, I'm like, duality is so important. And I feel like people need to think about perhaps broadening what they show their kids from a very early age so they can learn like survival, for example. Like, let's think about like how we survived, right? When we go to school, we learn how to survive because you're either dealing with bullies or predatory teachers or whatever kind of weird shit. I'm not saying that's something we should have gone through, but we learn those things from those environments, right? And so watching the difference between like Amari be able to just like switch in and out of, okay, when this damn lady who hovers is here, let me just pin it up and act like I have some damn sense, versus when he thinks I'm in a room not listening and I can hear all day business and he out here trying to run amok. It was actually impressive. And I was like, yo, he gonna fucking take over the wall. Yeah, Jack? He's gonna take over the wall. But then like watching Dylan, I'm like, yeah, the code switching of it all. But baby, Dylan is up front. He don't have time for the girls. Okay, I'm following the rules. I'm not playing with you. Okay, I'm not playing with you. This is not a game. I'm busy. Okay?
Listen, that's one thing I will say about me as a child. As much as I was a heathen, there were certain heathen activities that my friends used to want to do that I used to be like, oh, my mother would shoot my ass. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. And I was very like peer pressure. Peer pressure started kicking my ass when I was in high school, but like elementary, all of that, when kids used to want to be doing like grade A dumb shit, I used to be like,
relax.
No,
relax. Yeah, exactly. But I think for whatever the future is going to look like for these kids, I do recognize that duality is important for them, because we have to be able to survive in any environment. And unfortunately, we have to be able to survive in the Black community. We have to be able to survive when we're around our white people, the white people in this world, or other like, just ethnic groups or racial groups or whatever. And I'm just like, okay, these kids are teaching me the importance of duality and how it benefits me, and how I mean, we learned duality very young from being Caribbean kids. Hey, Isa, you said you had that real like culture shock when you went to college. Deidre and I learned duality when we or learned how to code switch when we moved to St. Croix from New York.
Mhm.
And we had to pick up on the Caribbean accent. You know what I mean? We had to learn how teachers, maybe getting your ass beat in school.
That was not a thing in New York.
That was
Like,
not a thing in New York.
bitches is going to jail. Like,
You're going to prison. You're losing your job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we learned that survival from being in those different environments. And watching them, I was like, oh, so people need to know, like, yeah, we have to expose these children to all the things.
yeah.
Obviously,
But
keeping them
also-
safe, but
That's a good point, and it makes me think about too, like, technology and like how younger kids are growing up in this super digital environment, and it almost feels like people giving up on this generation of like, oh, they're gonna grow up with the internet and they're gonna be a lost cause and this and that. But whenever I think about Dylan, I think about the fact that Dylan loves to go outside and play. Yes, he's an introvert, but he loves to go to the park or to the splash pad or to all of, like, he went in the pool the other day with Diamond and having the time of his life. And at the same time, he's this like gamer kid who fucking love the internet, right? And if you all didn't accept that he could do both and expose him to both, you would just kind of leave he with a gaming thing and kind of let that be it, right? And
exactly.
kind of coin that as just like, oh well, that's this generation thing. And it's a very limited way of thinking when we as adults, like, we have our social media, but we also like to go to the bar, but we also like to go to the beach. Like, we could accept that we like to do all these things, but we see kids play video games once and we'd be like, oh, this generation.
Oh, they don't want to go outside.
Like-
They're done. And you pigeonhole these kids when in actuality, you're just being lazy and don't want to take
You're
them
being lazy.
outside.
Like, we're not
Exactly.
giving them the opportunity to have duality when we know we have it. So why can't they have it?
Yeah.
Why can't I have it? Exactly. So yeah, the children taught me or reminded me of the importance of duality, but also it made me think about how I benefit from it. And of course, listen, I do just ruminate and go into the deep holes because of course I'm like, well, when did I start learning how to code switch? Or when did I start being able to navigate it as two different types of diamond? And it went all back to that shift in my environment, moving from New York to the Caribbean. And then our mother literally being in her household and she's like, girl, what you mean tree? Like the tree's outside or the number 3? Like, you're going to speak standard American English in this house. You know what I mean? Like when you're out there, you're going to speak with your little Crucian accent, but you're going to be able to do both. Like that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, period. This is something I learned from Dylan directly, which I could have used this as my example earlier when you asked something that I learned, what's something I learned from the kids about your mental health. It's really the importance of prioritizing yourself. Now, Deidre mentioned this, but I'm gonna tell you right now, Deidre, if you ever questioned whether you're setting an example for Dylan to like take care of himself, you're doing it. Because let me tell you something. Dylan does not play games. Okay, Dylan is taking care of himself first. That's what, okay. Me and Dylan taking this long ass drive. I have to give y'all the anecdote of it all, right? We going to Pop house. Pop lives an hour from me. So this is a Friday. Like I'm painting the picture. Everybody's universally exhausted on Fridays. Like Friday is the last day of the week. We've been walking all day. We've been doing our thing. Summer camp is a full-time job for this kid, okay? So I'm picking her up from summer camp on a Friday and we have this long ass drive. Bitch, I'm tired. My boy knocked out immediately. Like I stopped to the Walmart to get some board games. Literally by the time I hit the left on a stop sign, knocked out, right? When I said to you, his phone must he ring about 6 times. And each time that our phone ring, he look at the thing and hit decline. The first one, I'm like, okay. I cannot make this up. Till I turning down my music, like, okay, maybe he take the music too loud. Like, I want him to like care about his social life, like his friends in Jersey. I don't want him, I'm thinking about like, God, these kids probably think Dylan hates him now, and because he in Georgia. I'm thinking about all this shit. Dylan don't care about none of that.
I don't give a fuck.
Decline
Stop calling
immediately. Stop calling me. By the second decline, I see him sending a text. He got my business.
I'm taking a nap.
I'm taking a nap. So I turn on I said, Puppy, if the music is too loud, I could turn it down so you could talk to your friends for a little while. He says, I'm not answering the phone. I said, why? He said, I'm too tired. Like, mind you, he's up now, but he just don't feel like talking. Bitch, I'm tired. I'm like, when is this drive gonna be over? when I said that boy did not answer the phone until he was good and ready,
Oh,
because he had questions. When are we stopping to get food? How much longer is the drive? Like, so he got his own stuff to process. He just wake up from this nap. We still on the highway. So I was like, in that moment, I was like, you here studying these kids, them badass kids, they ain't thinking about why Dylan probably ain't answer the phone. They just care about, bitch, we want to talk and play right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, one thing kids gonna do is prioritize themselves. Like, they called back like 16,000 times because they really wanted to talk. They were prioritizing themselves.
Dylan and his
Dylan
friends have a group chat. They don't be FaceTiming each other in a group chat to play Fortnite or Roblox.
And Dylan said, decline.
And Dylan said decline each time and did not care. But guess what? After we got home, reached the pop house, he did his hugs, he showed the report card, he ate his food.
Oh, he showed the report
He went upstairs
card.
and called them children. He went upstairs and they were up there running amok. And I was like, wow.
He said not until I read. I love that though.
So the last one, which this is the big one, right? And this is why I saved it for last. Because we've always heard the term like ignorance is bliss, right? And we spoke about weaponizing competence earlier and all that good stuff. But sometimes it's not that people are weaponizing incompetence. Sometimes people are just ignorant to the things that impact the people around them, right? Yeah. And so I'm going to use this example of Dylan and his fancy breakfasts because his mother feeds him 3 meals with meat and 2 sides for all of the meals.
We eat balanced plate in this house. We have nutrient dense meals in this
and I love that for him. When I say I love that for him, it's definitely like love that for him.
We have a protein, a starch, and veggies in this house.
Okay, well, let me tell you something, child.
Whole grains in this house. I'm done.
I had my little reminder of like, it was like a little light bulb went off in my head, and I was just like, oh yeah, he's ignorant to how much work it takes to prepare this meal. I'm gonna include him. Because I remember one time during the pandemic, he really wanted pancakes, and he knows his mom is a baker. Like, he knows she always have the ingredients for all the things. So we didn't have the quick, pancake mix. But he was like, but doesn't mommy have the stuff to make pancakes from scratch? And I'm like, sure she does. Let's do it together. And when he realized I had to crack them eggs and measure that, all that shit, he was like, oh my God, this is so much work. He never asked for pancakes from scratch again. Okay? And so this particular Saturday, either it was last Saturday or the Saturday before, I woke up that morning and I was just like, I genuinely don't feel like coming out of this bed. Like, I'm too tired. And I offered that boy cereal. This was maybe my 3rd attempt during his stay here, offering him cereal. And this was the day that I really realized I'm never gonna get him to eat cereal as a meal. Right?
Like, snack. He has that as an after school snack.
I was like, hey bud, it's Saturday. You want a big old bowl of cereal? Like, you can have the sugary kind. He was like,
the Diamond try to paint this fuck as like a legit. She was like, you gonna have all the sugar? You gonna have a big ass bowl? And then I was like,
maybe you can have the Captain Crunch. Like, you want the big salad bowl? Like,
Dylan, when he gets home from school, he makes himself a bowl of cereal. That's the most.
My boy look at me like,
bitch.
I said, cereal? He didn't even want to say, I guess. Like, when I offer him oatmeal, he'd be like, I guess, sure. The cereal, he flat out be like, girl, no, I'm not eating that as a meal, not for breakfast, right? So I said, And it was like I said, that light bulb moment went off of like, bitch, ignorance is bliss. And as I'm like trying to like give myself the energy, I'm like, bitch, you just have to provide insight so you could get a little empathy or compromise from this human, right? And so that was the morning I said, you know what, Bob? You're right. Come help me make the breakfast. Baby, when I said I had a little fucker laying out the bacon on the tray, I had him putting them eggs to boil. Okay, I know you go get it, so we got to do this. Listen, by the 3rd strip of bacon, my boy was over it. He was exhausted. He was like, wow, this is a lot. I said, well, these big breakfasts that you want all the time, you want eggs, meat, and the pancakes and stuff. This is what I have to do every day by myself.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? My boy is quite satisfied now with either the eggs and the pancake thingy or the meat and the pancake thingy. So it's always gonna be that bready thing and a meat or eggs. Pick one, but ain't gonna be both, because he know If it's too much work and I too busy, he gotta do it himself. He ain't want to do it. Okay. But when he was ignorant to how much labor it was, bitch, he wasn't happy. It's just like, bitch, I just know I want my eggs boiled, just the white parts, sprinkle of salt, not too much. Like all the demands. And I was happy to give them. But daily, I said no.
Diamond, thank you so much though for like all those making those
This was so
observations.
good.
Like it was such a good episode. And I think we found a good way to tie it between like what you're observing from the kids and their behaviors and also like the shit we
Yeah.
see in adults. And if anybody
Facts.
listening today, I hope that whether you're on your way to walk or on your way to see a man or on your way to see somebody else man or on your way to see whoever, that you come with a little bit of empathy.
Reflect on that shit.
Episode done.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on, Sissy.
Yeah,
You brought
thank you,
so much
Diamond.
value to this episode, to this podcast, honey.
Thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Good Up Podcast. You know where to find us right back here next week. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tell us on social media or tell a friend. Because a lot of times the way people come to the podcast is because one of their friends tell them to. So do us a favor and tell your favorite person in the whole world, like, hey, do you listen to Good Up? And if they don't, sell us. That being said, Deidre, is there anything you want to add? I always tell you to tell the people and buy, but I don't never ask you if we got closing, if you got any final thoughts.
Send your man over here. Tell him to come pay my rent.
Bye. This season of the Good Up Podcast is sponsored by Empath Psychological Services. The Good Up Podcast is Black woman hosted and produced by Deidre Ritter and Heiza Quinones Ivory. Find us on all social media platforms at Good Up Pod. Tag us using the hashtag Good Up Tuesday and join the VIP section over on Patreon for exclusive bonus content at patreon.com/GoodUpPodcast.